This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and tonight we are bringing you the Bully Blog podcast. Sometimes I get a little tongue-tied when I say that.
Not easy to say.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about this, not because we're talking about kids who are being bullied or dogs who are bullying us right now. I love it. But the philosophy of bullies just seems to be growing in our whole society. And we see a lot of it in the schools. And so, Dave, you even mentioned this, that, you sort of spot little things that are going on in the classroom and you try to, guide your students away from that behavior. But if they're seeing it at home and on the streets, how much can you really do in an 8-hour day?
Yeah. Well, I think we try when we're in the classroom, if we see that type of behavior, just to nip it in the bud and just let the kids know and let the class know that it's certain things they're not tolerated. I mean, kids are kids. Kids are going to make mistakes. They're going to tease each other and stuff like that. But once it starts to get beyond a certain point and you're in the classroom long enough, you get to know what that point is. You say, no, that's not going to happen. And I'm super grateful to have an administration that backs me up and that backs up the teachers, because that is so important. And you hear that in other schools of teachers that don't have the backing of the administration. I go, oh God, just poor you. Because it's huge. Because if there's things that you can't deal with in the classroom, there needs to be another level of consequence where they can go to another level of support. So, and just a little perspective, because I want to bring in Mr. Quan, Dr. Quan, Renee Quan. This is an interesting podcast for me, because this is sort of bridging two worlds for me. Obviously, you and I started this, Karen. You found out about me through my film, The Reunion. Right. And through doing a few podcasts, you and I put together this Bully Blog podcast. And first it was you and me, and it was you and me and Andrea, my partner in the movie. And then it was you and me and Esther Yang, who runs the not-for-profit organization to combat bullying in New York. And now to bring in, somebody who's a school administrator at my school. I feel really grateful. So just a little bit of context. But I'd love to ask Dr. Quan sort of like, what is your philosophy, around bullying? I mean, obviously we still see that in school. I mean, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. My philosophy around bullying, I guess the first thing I think about is, like you mentioned, Dave, like there's kind of a continuum of like teasing and joking around. And then when you take that to a deeper level, like to a more extreme level, then all of a sudden it's bullying. And it really kind of is about how someone receives something, right? Like there's so much teasing and making fun of, and to some degree, I think I see it a lot with the boys, but definitely also with girls as well. But, you see a lot of that, like clowning on each other, and it's all kind of like part of how, they're kids. It's part of how they interact and relate to each other and play with each other and all of that. And then in some cases, a couple people, they're not even friends at all, and there's teasing going on, and then it gets into like, can I curse in here or no?
Oh yes, go right ahead.
Okay, all right. and then it gets to like shit talking, and it kind of gets to this whole other level. So I guess like to me, it's just there's this whole range of just behaviors that on the lower level you would call teasing, playing around, and then on a higher level you would say it's bullying or threatening or intimidating. And then sometimes it starts on this level and it crosses over into that level. And it's just, I guess the couple of things you're asking, like a philosophy. The first thing I would say is bullying is all about how, I guess, it's being received, because you can clown around with your friends. And if you truly are like messing around and dishing it back, and that's just how you interact, then, then it's not bullying. And then the other thing is, if anyone has any type of hurt feelings around things other people are saying, then then that deserves to be addressed. That is kind of like a bigger philosophy of mine, which is just feelings, feelings matter, I guess, and is how I would phrase it. And if someone has hurt feelings, even in a tiny way or in a large way, that that matters. And as an administrator and as a teacher, we should always address it when someone feels a certain sort of way, even if the other party didn't mean to. Because, again, there's just so many forms of bullying. There's unintentional bullying as well. So you're playing around, and then all of a sudden someone gets hurt feelings, and the other person, the bully, may be none the wiser. I mean, sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. And so I guess that's my philosophy, is that if anyone has a feeling about something that's not positive, whether it's bullying related or anything, period, then that person deserves to be heard out. And that's my leadership philosophy, honestly. And that person needs some type of a support. So, or maybe even to be heard out. So yeah, that's my general thought, just on the topic of bullying. I'd been bullied as a kid. I grew up not too far from our school, from Morks, and I'm half Filipino, I'm half Chinese. And most of our students, people in our neighborhood are Latino. And then, maybe like a couple Filipino families in the area here or there. I was definitely the only, I guess, part Chinese kid in my school. And so the bullying that I received was based on like Asian like insults and things like that. And it was, I don't know, just thinking back, the bullies, they were kind of friends of mine, but they would say these like racist things, and so it was kind of funny, it's kind of weird, and I would still hang out with them, and I didn't love that they would say these things to me, but yeah, that's just kind of what the situation was.
So you sort of like understood that that was their culture, but they weren't really being mean. They didn't think they were really being mean. They thought you were all just having a little bit of fun.
I don't know if I'd go that far. I think a lot of the, as I'm relating it to you right now, I don't know, back then I didn't have a, a great perspective around it. I think they were trying to be a little bit mean. They weren't trying to like, devastate me or anything like that. It's just, I don't know. It's probably a generous interpretation on my part, but they were kids. They heard things. They didn't know any other Asian kids, so they repeated it at me.
Right.
They knew it wasn't a nice thing to say. They're trying things out. Trying to see what sticks. Trying to be funny. Trying to be the center of attention. Trying to be the clown. So yeah, they're being a little bit mean.
Yeah, I find that, I find that with middle school, and let me know what you think, Dr. Quan. And I think this was the case for when I was younger, is, the biggest thing that kids want is they don't want to be humiliated, and they don't want to be singled out. So I think the best way to do that is to humiliate and to single out others, right? Do you find that in your experience at the school?
Yeah. I think so. I think, all kids and all adults to some degree, especially kids, like, they're trying to figure out who they are, trying to figure out their place in the world. They see something that's weird, they want to make jokes about it. They hear something maybe their parents say that are maybe a little unkind, and they repeat it, and they kind of want to see what's going on. And yeah, I do think, bullies, are just testing things out, and then also, yeah, no, I guess that was it. That was a thought. Like, I think in some degree, bullies are insecure about, being the tough guy. Yeah, like they don't want to be weak. So maybe they overcompensate, like a lot of times as an administrator, as a teacher, in my time in schools, in high school, middle school, bullies pick on, like quote unquote, more vulnerable kids.
Sure.
And, if you're out there trying to be the toughest of the tough, hey, go pick on a tough guy, go pick on a tough girl, but no, bullies pick on the vulnerable. And
Well,
so there is absolutely something going on there. It's definitely some type of a psychological power move on their part to make themselves feel strong.
and they don't change as they get older because we've seen this in our own society. We've seen it in government, I'm not going to pick on the guy next to me because in theory he's an equal, but I will pick on the people that surround him because they're not as strong, and then you sit here and you go, you're an adult. Why are you doing that? And I think that's what our kids are seeing. And I think a lot of us are realizing that what was politically correct 10 or 20 years ago no longer is. But some of us are still using those terms. And so, what are our kids supposed to think about it?
Mhm, mhm. You know what? On that note, our kids nowadays are they're really something in terms of I guess maybe society has gotten more conscious overall, and our kids definitely reflect that. So in a lot of ways, and I don't know if you're seeing this, Dave, in the classroom and with the kids nowadays, in a lot of ways that they weren't when I was growing up, they're a lot more conscious, I would say, about gender identity. And they know all the terms and this, and they ask very poignant questions about gender identity that I definitely didn't have that vocabulary in
Right.
college. Yeah, our kids are really, really conscious about those, and really, I would say, accepting. And for the most part, obviously not everyone, but in a lot of ways they are. Yeah.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I think the kids are much more accepting in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of sexuality,
Yeah.
more so than when I was growing up, for sure.
Mhm.
For sure. Certain things come up in class. I'm like, oh God, when I was a kid, kids would have started laughing or making fun.
Yeah.
But we still have to let them know. You know what I mean? Like, there was something we were dealing with in class recently, and I had to be it was actually had to do with an Asian character. We were doing Seed Folks, and I was very clear, like, okay, kids, we're not going to make fun. You know what I mean? Like, if you do an accent, you need to do it in a way that you're playing the character. You're not playing it to try to get laughs. You're not doing it in any sort of mean way. Because we need to be very sensitive, particularly now with some of the violence against Asians that we've seen in the country. It's a very particular time. Not that any other time shouldn't be, but we still need to let the kids know. And when we let them know, our kids will be respectful of that.
Well, I think if you have the right teachers, administration, okay, the right community leaders who allow our children to ask the questions, okay, and to be aware of differences. I mean, I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and I've related this story over and over again. I think I was 9 years old. My cousin Stuart was 17. I thought he walked on water as far as I was concerned. And I remember one night I pulled him to a side and I said, Cousin Stuart, I'm going to marry you someday. And he said, no, you're not. And I said, it's okay that you're my cousin. I'm going to marry you. And he said, one of these days you will understand why. And when I graduated high school, he said to me, do you now understand why you will never marry me? And I said, it's okay that you're gay. I would still marry you in a heartbeat. But at 9, I didn't know that vocabulary. And I thought, he was just being, hey, I'm your cousin. Even at 18, people didn't talk about it. But, he felt that he could at least share that with me. And that's when I really got this big awareness of, you know what? I love people. I don't look at who they are. If we get along, that's great. Are you seeing that more and more today now that kids are more aware of differences?
Yeah, definitely. While we're talking, like, just in this last month, like, a couple of things came to mind. One of them, we took our kids on a camping trip with the Pali Institute, which was really great. And I was on the bus and I was talking to a young lady. She was a 6th grader, she was like, oh, what are the cabins, what the bathroom situation, what's that looking like? And I was like, oh, they have the boys go in one cabin and the girls go in another cabin with a girl counselor, and the boys go in another cabin with a boy counselor, and each cabin has their own bathrooms, so that it's just kind of like separate and whatnot. And then she asked like, oh, what if someone is non-binary? I took I was like for a moment I was like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
And then I was like, yeah, you know what, I don't know, but I imagine that the Poly Institute would certainly be kind of accounting and flexible, for that. And I just like there's a moment of like being taken aback by the question, because yeah, it's like she's sixth grade. Yeah, I wouldn't have had the consciousness to again ask that question in college, but
And right now we still have men's room, women's rooms, and,
yeah, yeah.
either or. So,
Yeah.
either,
Then yeah, sorry, another quick story. Like a couple of weeks back, there was, so actually even like yesterday or the day before, yeah, the kids, they ask questions because they want to see where adults stand. Like I think I forget exactly what happened, but I think there are these two girls, and they're like, oh, they're together. They're telling me they're together, and they're like, what do you think about that? And they look at me, like, what do you think about that? I'm like, oh, hey, like if they're happy, then yeah, that's cool. And then a couple of weeks back, there was another group of kids who were, we were just outside on the playground, and they were like, hey, Dr. Quan, like, what do you do? What do you like identify as, like? And then I was like, oh, what do you mean? They're like, oh, I don't know, like bi or this or that. And then and again, I was also again like kind of like wow, such a brazen question. Like I would never have asked a teacher, an adult, a principal that. But it's very innocent. They were asking. They were
Sure.
just really genuinely asking. And I was like, and then I paused. I was like, what there's a lot of terms out there. I was like, afraid I don't have the right term. So I'm like, oh, I'm hetero. And then they're like, hey, and then they were like, what do you mean? They're like, does that mean straight? And I was like, oh yeah, straight. They're like, oh, okay, thank you. And then they ran out and played somewhere else. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. It's very interesting.
absolutely.
Big consciousness yeah, yeah.
They are quite sophisticated, but they surprise me sometimes in their naivete as well.
Yeah,
I remember a couple of weeks ago, we were, I think it was also Seed Folks. There was a Vietnamese character, and I said, my ex-girlfriend was Vietnamese, and I'm just telling a story. They start laughing. They're like, "Oh my God, Mister, you're telling us something so private." I'm like, "Damn."
Yeah. And I think well, I mean, that's a whole nother dimension of just kind of like, again, I grew up not too far off from Works, and again, I grew up with mostly Latino kids and maybe some Filipino kids. So it was talking about me getting bullied for being half Chinese. Like it was interesting to them. It was they hadn't met someone who was Chinese, and then later in life, like in college, like you meet people from all types of backgrounds and whatnot. So our kids, as open and as more conscious they are, they still don't have much exposure to different races, and probably a lot of communities. Almost every community isn't necessarily as diverse as the college campus. So yeah, so it's still the naivete that you said, like they haven't met people from all walks of life necessarily.
Right.
Well,
What do you find is the best way to communicate with kids that are bullying? How do you deal with that? Because I know I was just talking to somebody, I saw you a half hour ago. I was talking to somebody in our professional development meeting about how, like, when I first started teaching, the alpha kid in the class, and that could be a male or a female, I generally would butt heads with, because I thought, oh, they're trying to usurp me. They're trying to, all these things, until I realized, I needed to make them like my lieutenant, my second in charge, and befriend them, because they didn't need to be yelled at. They needed more love. And I had to find ways of being much more of a kind of like, just find ways of dealing with them that wasn't like head on. So I guess how do you best communicate with kids that are bullying?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. when people are bullying, it is a manifestation, I think, of like of a semi-extreme behavior. Like it's not normal. It's not strictly speaking normal to feel okay about hurting other people, right? So what I find with kids and people in general is if they're bullying and they're kind of not really super aware, or they don't care that they're really just hurting someone, when they're kind of at that level, it's I they're like they're hurting inside somehow. They're needing something. They're needing attention. Maybe at home they see their parents fighting, and that aggression translates, or maybe they need attention. They're feeling insecure, so they need to look like the tough guy. They need that attention from their friends. So how, how do I deal with a student that's bullying or a person that's bullying? The same way I deal with, I guess, everyone in any situation, bullying, bullied. Like I first, I kind of try to hear them out from their perspective of what's going on in the situation. And then I try to really, to the best I can, really understand where they're coming from, because even someone who's bullying, there's some form or function, there's some reason why they're doing what they do, and whether or not they know it. So I try to understand the situation. And generally with someone who's bullying, they'll frame it as, well, they're somehow a victim, and they're like, maybe someone said something that upset them, and so they went overboard and they're like lashing back. It's something like that usually. And so yeah, for some reason, a bully will usually explain what prompted them to do what they do. And then I'll try and, like, I guess, just kind of, after I've heard them out, I try and talk them through how their actions are hurting the other person, and their actions are probably overboard, probably way over what the initial situation prompted for, or there's a misunderstanding in the initial kind of like interaction that got them upset. So those are two common things that I notice. They're coming back and lashing back, and it's either too much or there's just like a misunderstanding in the first place. And so there's some need that they're trying to meet, whether it's the need to like retaliate because they felt wronged or something. And so I'll kind of generally try to hear them out and try and figure out, like, hey, like, what's another way that can we get in a circle together with this other student and try and like figure out like why they upset you, and then how can we come to like a resolution, right? Because you, like the bully, you bullying them, and you bullying them is really just gonna kind of cause them to just feel bad, or cause them to come back and escalate even more. And those are two situations that are not going to be great for you as the bully. So let's find a situation that is actually going to get you what you need, which is maybe you need an apology. Maybe they did actually wrong you in a little way. Maybe there's a misunderstanding. Maybe we need to talk it out. Maybe we need to figure out what's going on. So yeah, it's kind of like a problem solving perspective that starts with trying to understand the what's going on in the mind of this quote unquote bully,
Do you find that, and sorry, I have so many questions, Karen, and I'm going to
No, I
shut up.
love it. I love it.
Oh, good. Okay. Because I'm so curious. We don't get to always talk like this, It's a whirlwind, so much going on. So I've worked with Dr. Quan for 3 years. So this is really fascinating to me. Do you find that these circles help? I know that they have, for me, and we have another administrator, Mr. Cruz, who's really wonderful at doing these circles as well. And we've been doing them for a few years. Do you find that they help? Do you have like a success story where things have shifted?
Yeah. Oh, so they absolutely help. They help a lot. They're not infallible. Sometimes they don't help, but like for the vast majority of time they do. They're almost magical in that sense. But there's nothing magic to it. It's kind of like what I described. It's a matter of giving people space to listen to each other, and then kind of figuring out where the disconnect happened. That's like literally all it is. And so do they work? They work so often that I think people would be surprised. And it's not easy. It takes and Cruz is great at this. Like it really takes I heard recently my girlfriend was sharing, like there are 4 types of listening. She went to some training once, and there's listening to respond, there's listening to understand, And then there's distracted listening. I forget the fourth one, but it's like listening to response. Like you're not really listening because you want to say something, so you're not really listening. So there's all these different types of listening. And to make a circle work, you have to truly be listening to understand, because you can't write off the bully. You know, they have to know that you're empathizing, and even though they're bullying someone, that they're somehow maybe a victim. Like that's possible. And in order to do that circle, like they need to know that, you know, that they're not this just bad kid all around. Like something prompted them, and it's something that's probably a trigger for them, and it made them lash out in this way. And then everyone's like, whoa, this kid is being like this terrible person and this bully. And that's what most adults see, the bad part that they did, and they're not willing to put in the time to understand the antecedent. So yeah, they work a lot. And in the few times that they don't work, you know, sometimes the person conducting it didn't take the time to build that empathy, and they weren't really entering the circle in a vulnerable place where they're willing to kind of like say, okay, yeah, I did pretty bad things, but you know, and I'm willing to own up to it, because you're listening to why I got triggered and you're treating me like a human being. So that needs to be established. That takes time, that takes patience. It takes like a sense of stepping out of one's ego, if you will, because with a lot of things that happen in schools, it's easy to get indignant at the bully because, hey, you hurt this other kid, and that just makes you mad as an adult. Like there's this other person that you hurt, and you want to have that protective sense. So yeah, circles work pretty well, and it's not, not any type of like magic. It's literally a structure that creates a little bit of vulnerability and openness and listening, and prioritizes like listening and understanding and connecting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you had, without naming names, have you had like a specific success story that comes to mind? Not to put you on the spot.
No worries. I can't, I can't, I got to think about that and let you know later on, because my role now is to empower crews to do it, right? Like I was having a conversation with him today, actually. I was like, he's a basketball fan. So I was like, hey, your great Cruz is great. He's so responsive. He's so proactive. And I was like, hey, but you know what? Like you're trying to be Kobe, and you are in a lot of ways, you're Kobe. I need you to be Phil Jackson. I need you on this other level. And I need to be like whoever the general manager is, So I'm really intentional about like,
you don't want to be Jerry Krause.
Yeah, no, not Jerry Krause. Right. Yeah.
He got pummeled on that documentary.
Yeah, he did. So I'm really trying intentionally to be at this level, meaning I'm not leading the circles as much as I would love to. So yeah, so nothing comes to mind. I'd have to dig back a few years. I have led circles. I haven't led circles in your time at Mars. I've led circles with staff, and they've been pretty successful as well. And I participated in circles with students, and they've all generally been successful. Yeah, I don't know. I'll let you know if I think of a specific, story without names, but yeah.
It's a little bit of a different situation, and it'll lead to another question. And I did say I'd shut up, and I guess
No, keep going.
I'm too in now, Karen. I'm just too
Love
in.
it.
There was a student years ago, actually, before you were the principal, who was one of the real difficult behavioral students in 6th grade. Mm-hmm. And I had him in 7th grade, and he was still difficult, but he was a little bit better. And I remember sitting him next to a girl, and she kind of calmed him down. That was one of my strategies, to sit certain boys next to certain girls, and that seemed to calm them down, which works in adulthood, by the way, as well. But by 8th grade, he had become part of the football team. Mm-hmm. And he was putting all of his energy into football, and he was a star football player.
Nice.
And the behaviors just kind of went away. And I don't remember seeing anything like that. That kid in 6th grade had so much behavioral issues, and by 8th grade was not a problem.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you see that, where certain kids can put their energies, whether it's into a sport or into a club or something like that, and you see a transformation.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I was actually, there's a young man in 7th grade who I had almost literally the same conversation with. He gets in trouble kind of a lot. And he's not, you know, again, like, well, I don't necessarily think any kids are bad kids per se, but you know, he gets in a lot of trouble, and a lot of times it has to do with he has this just little kid energy, and he gets in situations, and the friends that he has in his group like lend itself towards where he can like just mess with people with that weird energy. And I told him like, hey, I see you playing soccer, I see you playing basketball at recess, and you know, and I think those are great times to kind of get that energy out in a way that's not, you know, I was like, you're hanging out with your friends and you're not playing those sports at lunch or at recess. You kind of, you know, I noticed you still kind of like need to move around. You need to be talking to people. That's just like his energy that he has about him. And I think that leads to a place where you start messing with people and then you end up getting in trouble. And I told him like, do more of the sports and do less of the other things. And so, yeah. You know, I absolutely think that a lot of it is channeling energy in a certain sort of way. And sports is a great way to do that. And it has some of those features where you can be competitive. You can, you know, you can want to, you know, beat the other team, but it's within these rules and these guidelines. So it's very fair. Yeah. Versus trying to beat other students at like making fun of them and stuff like that, where, you know, it's not, yeah, I don't know. It's a different type of, interaction, and usually doesn't lead to good things. So yeah.
Yep. You want to jump in, Karen?
Well, you know, one of the things I really hear the two of you saying, and I wish my son had had this when he was in school, is teachers and administrators who know how to deal with different behaviors. As I've mentioned to Dave, my son is high functioning autistic. And they convinced us at a very early age of first grade that every year he was going to go in front of his class and admit that he's on the spectrum and he may have some quirks. And that worked fine until he got to fourth grade. And then it was like, oh, now we can bully him about it. And it caused a lot of problems. And many times the administration would remove my son from the situation and sometimes send him home for a week with homework and say, go home to mom, you're okay, you're not in trouble. We're going to let these kids who are bugging you stay in class. And so when he would come back, he was bullied again because, hey, where were you? And the sad part is things happen that we didn't know about until just recently. And luckily he's in counseling and he's getting help from it. But it makes a difference who is in that classroom. I mean, Dave, you've talked about it. I mean, just with the one kid that you realize maybe if you put him in a seat next to some girl who maybe is a little calmer, he'll get calmer. And that probably helped that progression to eighth grade playing football. Okay. But how do you get administration and teachers to understand all this? Because they've got so much on their plate.
Yeah. It's interesting the way you frame that question. How do you get them to get involved when there's so much on their plate? You know, as you're telling the story, I'm already kind of like, I kind of like, you know, I'm kind of like reacting a little bit to it because that just the whole how adults react to anything, to these situations, to these bullying situations, really kind of sets the tone for what kids are going to do. There's a kind of a when I was teaching and when I started teaching and I was very new and kids were running all over me. I went to this training that was a little bit kind of like a little bit too direct, a little too crude, but I remember one of their quotes was, kids misbehave and do things because nothing happens. And so, you know, I kind of like, I pause as I say that because I'm not this big, like, oh, punish kids and stuff like that. But I can appreciate that, you know, people operate based on incentives, positive and negative. And if you do something and nothing happens, then you'll do it again, right? Like if I'm speeding, which used to be more of a problem of mine, or getting a bunch of parking tickets, parking where I shouldn't because it's more convenient, and I never got any type of a ticket, I'd probably still be speeding, and I'd probably still be parking wherever I wanted. Why would I change?
Right.
Now I get philosophically why I shouldn't speed, and I get why I shouldn't just take any parking space that I want, but I'd probably do it if I never got any tickets. That's just the honest truth. People operate off of incentives, and if kids bully a little bit, and then that student gets sent home, like, hey, like, all right, cool. So when they come back, I'm gonna do the same thing. Maybe that kid will get sent home again, right? Like, so I guess you're telling that story, and it's just the philosophy is like, you never want to punish the victim. Like it is possible to, I think it's always possible to even if I honestly think the adults in those situations, I don't know, I could be wrong, I could hear more details about it, maybe it'll change my mind, but my gut reaction is adults, like, it's a lot of work. You got to go talk to the whole class, you got to monitor it, you got to, like, get these kids in trouble when they're saying mean things to your son, like, you got to, like, do all of that, but it's totally possible and totally worth it. So because you got to correct their behavior. If they sent your son home, they didn't correct anything. They didn't address the root, and the root was still there when your son went back. I'm not surprised. So how do you get adults to really get, like, yeah, that's a tricky one. I mean, if you're in a position of power or authority in a school, then you lead by example. You never let any bullying situation go, and you
Yes.
never address it with. Well, of course, you address it with the victim, but ultimately the victim isn't the one who has to take the ownership of their behavior. The aggressors, they're the ones who are put on the spotlight. They're the ones who, when a circle is, again, a nice experience where you converse and you share and you try to get to the root of the problem. In a conflict circle, when two kids have had a conflict, for example, in a bullying situation or in a fight, you close the circle with expectations, and that's where you say, okay, like, we were able to share out. I think we all have as best of an understanding of the other person's viewpoint as possible, and that equips us to avoid this situation in the future. But if Johnny, if I'm instructing you both, you don't have to be friends, but we need you to kind of, like, not put yourselves in situations where one might antagonize with the other. And like, Johnny, if you ever see a mad dog look, or if you ever see anything from Jimmy, you let us know, and we're going to be talking to Jimmy's parents right away. And then, Jimmy, if you see Johnny give you any type of a look, or any type of a this, or any type of a that, then we're going to be talking with Johnny's parents right away. So we kind of set those expectations that future interactions that could bubble up to something are super not okay. And we make it clear that we are closely monitoring, and we're asking them to check in with us. And, I think it's possible to do that even with a class, or even with a group. You can have a circle with a bigger group, and you can close out and say the expectation, yeah, if we get a smidgen of something, parents are getting called, and we're making it clear to everyone involved that we're asking to hear about little instances before they bubble up into big ones. And so yeah, it's just kind of, leading by example, leading by that mentality that we're protecting the people who are being victims in these situations. That's where we're starting from. We're not going to let any of these situations go. We are going to be relentless. We are going to monitor, but we're also going to have compassion towards the even the aggressors. Like, we're going to try and understand where we're going to try and understand where they're coming from, and try and, like, bridge it, and try and show them that, hey, like, okay, all right, so you're trying to meet this need, you're trying to meet that need, and guess what, you're ending up making someone feel terrible sometimes, in some cases, even in our school, like, hey, you're making someone hurt themselves, and yeah, so that's kind of the general approach.
And it feels really good as a teacher who experienced bullying growing up, and I don't tolerate that in my classroom. It's nice to have that as a priority with the administration, because we've had varying degrees of that throughout the years. And I'll give you an example. I had a I was coming up the stairs a couple of days ago and I saw two of my kids were pushing each other, one boy and one girl. And I was like, whoa, because that doesn't happen in my classroom. I've had fights in my class past years, 4 or 5, 6 years ago, when my class was a free for all. Like Dr. Quan was saying, and I got walked all over, and all that stuff. As a beginning teacher, it's really hard. But that doesn't happen. And a boy pushing a girl, you see that, you go, oh, geez, But I try to also treat them equally, in the sense, why are you pushing her, and why are you pushing him? Because I see you both pushing each other. And it made me a little nervous. I said, I don't want this to start to become a bigger thing, because it can. Let's nip it in the bud.
Sure.
That shouldn't happen. Like, I'm not going to go, oh, they're just pushing each other, they're just kids. No, that shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening in the hallway where it's unsafe and kids are walking by, and other kids shouldn't see that happening. So I talked to both of the kids. I let them know that wasn't okay. I gave them both attention. I reached out to the administration. I said, this is what happened. And then they circle back with me and they said, do you think we need, we'll do a circle to call parents. I said, I don't think we need to do that. I don't think we need to call parents.
Yeah.
I think we can deal with it just with the kids. And then by the time I circle back with the kids, I was like, have you guys talked to each other? They're like, about what? I was like, have you guys talked to each other about the incident the other day? And they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, have you guys apologized to each other? They're like, yeah. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Nice.
But I knew that the administration would deal with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's really good to know. They were actually going beyond what I thought
Mhm.
needed to happen. And that's very comforting. Like we deal with stuff, when it comes up, and it's important.
Yeah. And I would add to that and say, like, yeah, I Cruz and Brown are great. And the mentality also that anything that a teacher shares, we follow up with. Like, that's also part of the general philosophy of being responsive and supportive. And anything that comes up, we're going to follow up with. And then the last, another thing, a thought I want to share is like this philosophy of like, deal with things when they're small so that they don't become big. So there's nothing too small. You bring something up, we're going to deal with it. And then it's going to turn out, oh, it's nothing, like you said, that happens a lot. And that's great. Like that is our zone where I want to be. Because you'd be surprised if that situation, 50-50, maybe, if no one dealt with it, hey, maybe it could have turned into something. Like, things like that do happen all the time. So it's like, deal with things while they're small,
Well,
That's
and
true,
I
right?
like that you were observant, Dave, that you saw it, because there are some teachers who may have saw it as just playful, behavior, and maybe it wasn't. But the fact that you talked to them and they knew that, hey, if this escalates, there's going to be consequences. We've said kids will be kids. And we're going to try just about anything that we think we can get away with. And
Yeah. And I think, sometimes we, as teachers, I'll speak for myself, we don't want to deal with certain things because they're uncomfortable. But if we don't deal with them now, they're going to get more and more uncomfortable. So we have to
Absolutely.
deal with discomfort. Sometimes we have to have, I'm having one of these days. I don't want to have this conversation. It's like, I have to, or I have to say, listen, we're going to circle back tomorrow. I'm actually not in a place to deal with it today, but we're going to circle back tomorrow because that's not okay.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing that I've had to learn, is that if I'm not in a place to deal with something, nothing good's going to come of it, because I'm not going to be coming from a place of love and calmness. So they're not going to get an alternative to what they're actually going through. They're going to get somebody else who's aggressive, or, has that aggressive energy. So I got to go, listen, we're going to talk. And that's really hard, because I go, well, if I don't deal with it now, I'm never going to deal with it. Yes, you will. Put it aside, write it down, and come back to it tomorrow.
Well, and I think that's wonderful information for parents who may be listening to this, that maybe something won't be addressed immediately because none of the parties could really receive it at that time. And I know as a parent, there were times I felt like, hey, I have to address this right now. And what I thought was the right way turned into an aggressive conversation and nothing getting resolved. And then you have to backtrack and say you're sorry. So yeah, that 24-hour timeout sometimes is very good.
That's why and this could be controversial. I never understood hitting a kid. Now I don't have a kid, but that idea of spanking, maybe there's something to that when a kid is really little to spank, whatever. But it always felt very contradictory to me to say, I'm going to right their wrong by doing something wrong. So I don't understand that. Philosophically, I just don't understand that. I also don't have kids, so there's maybe adults out there going, "Oh, well, you shut up,"
Well, see,
but I try to do that as a teacher. I just, as a teacher, I try to come from a different angle, and I think part of to educate is to show a different way, right? To show an alternative, because a lot of times the kids don't know an alternative. This is what they know. This is what they know how to communicate. Well, is it working for you? Because if it's not working for you, let's try something else. I had a kid a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if you were still there, Dr. Quan, but I had a kid who was very angry and would get in a lot of trouble and said things to teachers that I was like, whoa. And I would sit down and tell him, like, listen, bud, you got issues with anger. Guess who else has issues with anger? I do. So I can work with you and I can tell you what's worked for me. And we worked all year. And like, he had moments where he would come at me, but we worked and we worked and we worked. And I was so proud of that kid by the end of the year, because he had grown so much. And I just remember feeling my heart was so warm. And then the next year he graduated, he culminated. And then he came back. I don't know if I ever told you this, Dr. Quan, but he came back the next year and I was going in the parking lot to my car and I heard somebody say, "Hey, mister." And I looked up and I was like, "Who's that?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm so-and-so." And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Oh yeah." I'm like, "No." Like, he didn't look the same. His energy was completely different. And I was like, wow, man. I was like, "Do you remember how you were a couple of years ago?" And he was like, "Nah, how was I?" And I was like, oh my God. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you just like, makes it all worth it,
but we all need somebody to help guide us. I don't care what age we are, okay? Because we look in the mirror and we don't necessarily see our faults. And even if we do, we have this whole list of people that we can blame that we act a certain way. But when somebody like a teacher, a parent, an administrator says, "You know what, I have that issue too, and this is how I've dealt with it, let's see if this would work for you." And that's really what our podcasts are all about. We've all had all these different scenarios. So we're here to say, we know how we've dealt with it in our life. Let's see if we can help you as well.
I wanted to ask you, because we're probably coming to the close, but I wanted to ask you, Dr. Quan, about routines and procedures. Because I know for myself, that's been the huge shift in the classroom. I thought it was like, you got to be tougher and stronger and disciplinarian. Let me get in the weight room to show them how strong I am. And then I just realized it was really about implementing procedures and routines that worked. And so, I see that, I see that you do that. And we've talked about that a little bit, but I'd like to hear about how you came in and sort of implemented procedures and routines and how effective that's been.
Oh man, wow. Just 1,000% agree. Just everything you're saying on point, like with my journey and through teaching like kids were walking over me when I first started, like, just straight up, just, I was just that teacher that they were really, I can't stress enough. They were walking over me. Yeah. And it took me a couple of years. And then I read First Days of School by Harry Wong, but like there probably was like most shifts in my mentality. There's probably a bunch of different influences, but routines and procedures, that's it. And that really is. I can never be like Miss Harry. I'm thinking like, I don't have that level of sternness. Sometimes I do, but that's not really to me what gets the job done for me in my personal style. For me, it is routines and procedures. It's being really clear what the expectations are, and then following, and then committed, just super committed follow through when they're met or not met. So, establishing I work with my team to be really clear what happens when the student has their phone, step 1, step 2, step 3. Like I'm trying to enact routines and procedures for the school that are super clear. I think we came back from the pandemic. There's things we can kind of clean up, like what happens when you're out of class without a pass. I'm working with Cruz and Brown again to make that super clear. And it's all about that clarity and about that follow through. And when I follow through, it doesn't look like that, kind of stern administrator or teacher. My follow through is like, "Hey, all right, you got your phone out. I got to take it." And you're like,
But it's
like,
even, it's even
yeah.
scarier though. Cause like when you say to me, like, "I need you to do your pay card," I'm like, okay, all right. Like you know what I mean? Cause I'm like, oh, He went
Yeah.
from like a 2 to a 3 on the you know what I mean? Like on
Yeah.
the, it's
Yeah. No, I
effective.
hear you. I hear you. But yeah, but yeah, that's how I do it. And they're like, I wasn't even, and I was like, hey, you know what? That's the rule. And then, I need your phone. Otherwise, you don't give it to me, I'm going to have to call home. And if you still don't give it to me, then XYZ. But that's my whole demeanor. I never, I'm never like mad at a kid or stern or angry. I just, hey, we set these procedures up, I'm going to follow through. That's literally my, like that's my demeanor. But I don't give up. I'm still standing there.
It's so
Like,
Tai Chi, man. It's so cheap.
yeah.
I
But
love
yeah,
it.
I agree. It's not about that, because, I don't know, you go that route with the sternness and the energy, and that can work for people. And then I think it's good for kids to see different adults with different styles. I do think that that's good. It's not necessarily my style, but also, I don't know, I guess my mentality is, A, that's not me. I'm just a little uncomfortable being that type of person. And then B, to me, I kind of like, I want to always project that, like, that calm energy with students, like, I'm not going to get mad at you. Like, you're a good kid. You're trying to, push boundaries. All right. I get it. We've all been there. But yeah, I need that phone.
I love that.
Yeah.
So the rule at school is they can bring their phone, but it has to be put away.
Often in their backpacks. Yes. And,
Okay.
when they leave campus, they can take their phone out, call their parents and whatnot. But, we don't want it to distract the learning environment. And I get that question a lot. They're always like, why can't we use our phones? And yeah. And then I always explain it to them, and,
It's so huge. I hear about other schools where phones are a problem. It's not an
Yeah.
issue. It has not been an issue. Once in a blue moon, I had a girl the other day who was doing this, this move. She's in her backpack. I'm like, oh, I know that move.
Yeah.
And I was like, what
Yeah.
are you doing there?
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm like, let me
Yeah.
have your phone.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I was just looking at the time. I'm like, there's a clock right there. She's like, oh, I don't know how to tell those rotary clocks. So,
Yeah.
and then I felt so bad because it turned out to be her birthday, and I forgot to sing her happy birthday to her. But point is that we don't have an issue with phones. But it's what Dr. Quan talked about before. It's like you stop it when it's there, because if it starts to get big, then we've lost the ability to teach.
Agreed.
Exactly.
And then the other thing about routines and procedures is that I was having a good conversation about this, about structures in general, about rules, is they exist like 95% of the time. They're going to create the culture you want. And then like 1 to 5% of the time, I don't know. I say, like, you got to be a human being, like, like there are exceptions to the rule, and you got to be careful of that too. And if you're not aware of that, then you're just like a robot, and the rules, the rules exist for a purpose. And if they, if there are cases where they go beyond that purpose, like there is truly an emergency, then you gotta be a human being. Like, kids ask me like, oh yeah, what if this is happening? And then I would be like, then come talk to me and I would let you use your phone, but
Yeah,
like, I was like, but that's almost surely not going to happen. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you have a great form of communication in your school. And we know that not all schools have this. It would be nice if this model could be taken, everywhere. It'd be nice if we could take it into corporate America. But I guess if we learn it in the schools, we can take it to the next step. And, I think those of you who will watch the movie, The Reunion, you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to feel pain, but you're also going to see that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And Dave, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story. I've told so many people about it, and they keep saying, when can we see it? And I said, I'll let you know. I'll probably be the second on Facebook plastering it out there.
It's coming soon. So we did get distribution. We're going to be in Soho Film Festival virtually in a few weeks. November 4th through 9th, we'll be appearing at Soho Film Festival. So you can check that out. Just go to the Soho Film Festival website. We did get distribution, so we will be releasing February 1st on a multitude of platforms yet to be determined. We will also do a theatrical run in New York, LA, and in the Midwest, also around February 1st. And you can find out more information about the movie on thereunionfilm.com. You can email me if you want to talk about schools, you want to talk about bullying. And the movie is about a guy confronting his childhood nemesis at their high school reunion, but also very much about confronting himself ultimately. And so that's that with the movie part. I just also, want to say thank you to you, Karen, so much. I'm so glad that this has sort of morphed into what it's become, this bully podcast. And we also have a bully blog on thereunionfilm.com where you can write in about your stories of being bullied or having bullied somebody else or seen bullying. We can post that. And I want to thank Dr. Quan so much for being here, for encouraging me every year to keep teaching when I'm trying to get out. He reels me back in, and I'm always so grateful for it. Or I come begging him to have a job back. And I love what you're doing and creating at the school. And like I've said to you multiple times, the culture is changing for the better every year, and it's getting more and more positive. And thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Karen, as well. It's very nice to meet you.
It was wonderful to meet you, and say hi to your dogs for me too.
I will.
We appreciate their comments. And we'll be back again next month, and we'll have another adventure on the Bully blog podcast.
It's hard to say.
Yes, it is. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.
All right,
now.
you too. Thanks so much. Bye.